Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donahue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy. Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donahue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, every single week, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. If this is your first time listening to us, we are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. Today is it's an old-timey Hollywood / aviation / business / real estate / super... Oh my God, this guy is off the charts. Like
wackadoo. I think that's the technical term.
Wackadoo is the best term. He is somebody who is exceptional in many ways, positive and negative. And I think those are the best episodes because also he's dead and gone, so we can't hurt anybody's feelings with this, right?
I hope so.
All right. You can find us on Facebook. We have a basic Facebook page. The reason you heard me kind of stutter for a second there is because I wanted to warn you. We use salty language on this program, and people like to go to our Facebook page to complain about that.
Deal with it. Fuck yeah. Fuck it.
We're on Twitter as long as that still exists at CreepPod. That's because somebody had What a Creep on Twitter for 10 years and never used it.
Creep.
We also have an Instagram site Instagram site. The handle is What a Creep Podcast. Please follow us there. We also have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. You can send us your suggestions for creeps and non-creeps. We're always looking for suggestions for both. Or if y'all would like some stickers, we have some fancy pants stickers that we could send to you in the mail. And
they're so cute.
They are, in a word, adorable.
Everybody drink.
Everybody drink. We'll explain that at the end of the show. Sonia, do you want to talk about our website real quick?
Yes, you can go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you ever wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. It has links to all of our past episodes, and in each of those episode descriptions are our sources, because we source every single creep we talk about. We're not making this shit up, and we want to give credit where credit is due. So if you're wondering, where'd they find that out? It's right there in the show notes. Do it. We also have a link to our merch shop where you can get T-shirts and tote bags and journals and face masks and all the good things. It's great. All the cool kids are doing it. You should do it too. And there's a link to our Patreon page. You want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, real quick. We have a Patreon page. We have our first few seasons up there. We're about to put up another season on that Patreon wall. What? It goes to help the cost for putting on the show. Seriously, we're not getting rich from it. It does help pay for all of our sources and the software and hosting the show and shit like that. We also put out 2 bonus episodes a month, and we usually get them in by the last day of the month. If nothing else.
Right. Yes.
But we do put out 2 bonus episodes. We also put out a newsletter that Sonia puts together, and it's pretty rad. So that's if you join the Patreon group. We totally appreciate it. But if money is tight, we totally understand, especially the tech world right now. I don't know if you heard about this past week. There was somebody that fired 7% of her staff and quoted Martin Luther King in her email to the staff.
Nice.
Yeah. Real class act.
Super. Yeah. Just acknowledge that laying off people is hard and be clear.
And don't combine it with the promotions that you also gave that week or how much money you made last year when you're firing people.
Yeah. Have a little empathy. Be clear. As Brene Brown says, clear is kind.
Clear is kind.
And yes, acknowledge what you're doing sucks and move on. Don't try to pin a Martin Luther King quote or a Maya Angelou quote in there. So just fucking do it. Just send it out, my friends. Just do it. Anyway.
Yes. Side note. So if you wanted to help us in another way, if you could leave us a review wherever you get your podcast, that would be amazing. Or leave stars or whatever they ask you to do. If you leave us a 5-star review in iTunes, we'll be your new best friend. And that includes Sugar Mamas in NC left us a really fab review in iTunes. We totally appreciate that.
Thank you.
It really helps us offset the shitheads that try to They try to crush our spirit, Sonia, but they will not.
It does not work. It does not work. We do not have the time or the patience to listen to angry people that leave 1-star reviews.
Like Carly Simon said, we ain't got time for the pain. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Haven't got time for the
That's
pain.
going to be stuck in my head all day. God damn it.
You can tell I listen to Serious 70s on 7 too much. By the way, Sonia, I didn't realize this until I put this together today in the Google Doc, which I have to share with you. It's our 10th episode.
Oh, that means it's the end of the season.
Season 18. We're capping it off with this. Isn't that awesome?
That is awesome.
All right,
Woo!
y'all. So, Sonia, when I mention the name Howard Hughes, what goes through your mind? What are your assumptions about him? What do you know about him? Anything?
I know the movie Aviator, The Aviator.
Mm-hmm.
I know that at one point he wore Kleenex boxes on his shoes and kept jars of his own urine. That's pretty much it.
Those are the highlights for sure. That's
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Thank you so much for supporting our show. If you'd like to join our Patreon, just kidding. Let me give you this intro. An old-timey Hollywood creep is a longtime fan favorite of this show, and we feel it is time to talk about a billionaire with a B, who was acclaimed as an original thinker, and to be fair, he honestly was, unlike some. He was also one of Hollywood's most prolific swordsmen. I can't believe I wrote that, but I did.
When you mean swordsman,
I
do you
mean his dick.
Oh, I get it.
Because I'm a child. Howard Hughes either inherited a fortune or he grew a nice inheritance. We'll talk about that in a minute. At the age of 19, and would go on to be one of the wealthiest people of the 20th century, while also innovating the worlds of business, aviation, real estate, and most notably, motion pictures, as they were called. He was also a manipulative, abusive creep who treated women like trash and was not all that great to anyone who worked for or was related to him. Leonardo DiCaprio played Howard Hughes in the movie The Aviator, which was directed by Martin Scorsese, and it features a really fun performance of Cate Blanchett as Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah, real good.
Really amazing. It's a beautiful film to look at, I have to say.
It is.
It's well done. It's a Scorsese film. Of course, it looks great. It got many of the important details correct, but it missed an opportunity to expose his more douchey behavior. And it was douchey behavior that existed in Hollywood. It exists to this day. Lucky us. So thankfully, this is what we do here at What a Creep. The trigger warning, sexual assault, coercive control, and general assholery. I do want to give the caveat of a lot of people talk about his OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. We do not make fun of people for having any kind of a mental health issue or an addiction issue. That doesn't make you an asshole. And so if we do bring it up, it's not to shame people and we're not going to goof about washing hands, especially, to be honest, more people should wash their hands frequently. Maybe not to the point of getting, chapped hands and blisters from it, but anyway.
Correct.
I need to focus. Okay. Sources for this episode: Britannica, Wikipedia, of course, History.com, BBC.com, The New York Post, The Daily Mail. This book I absolutely love, and it's by one of my favorite people, Karina Longworth. She does the podcast, goddamn.
You must remember this.
Thank you. I want to say Once Upon a Crime, and that's somebody else. You must remember this. So her book is called Seduction, Sex, Lies, and Stardom in Howard Hughes' Hollywood. A lot of alliteration there. That's why we were a little late getting on the horn today, because I was reading this. What a life I have. I get to read on a Friday afternoon. It's pretty cool.
That's delightful.
It was. Ranker, Howard Hughes, A Secret Life by Charles Higham. Cracked. I haven't used Cracked in a while. An NPR Fresh Air interview with Karina Longworth. History, How Stuff Works. A Texas Monthly article. This is back when Texas Monthly is a fantastic magazine. I think this thing is like 30,000 words. I'm not even kidding you. It's unbelievable. But this was published in 1977, which is about a year after Hughes's death. And Noah Dietrich Wikipedia, but to be honest, I might not get into him too much.
Okay.
All right. So let's start at the beginning. Howard Hughes, very handsome, tall guy that just took over Hollywood, had a lot of big ideas. He started out his life, he was the only child of Howard Robard Hughes Jr. and Aline Stone Gano. Howard and Aline were not rich. They were not from a highfalutin background. His father, when he was called Sonny by his father, by the way, he was the junior in the family, so they called him Sonny. And his dad was the postmaster where they lived. He was from Houston, Texas. He was, by the way, born December 24th, 1905. He lies about a lot of things. He's not still with us. That'd be pretty creepy. This 120-year-old man comes into the apartment. Leave me alone.
Talk about my sword.
They moved all over the place, but he was born in Houston, Texas, and they lived in Louisiana. They lived in California. His mother was an actress for a while. This is before motion pictures. By the time they had him, which again, it was in 1905, his father, he and his father shared the same traits. They were really into science, and they were into how things work. But they go really granular with the details, like not even just show me a fancy car. How does that car run? I mean, for a guy who he had $1 billion when he died, and this is 1976 billion, that's a shitload of money.
It's super rich.
This is not a guy that like bought Rolls Royces or anything. There's none of that interested him. But his parents were intelligent people, sensitive people. His mother was a tad neurotic. He slept with his mother till he was way older than what was known at the time.
So 35. Got it.
About it. They were very close, and she was actually the one, she was very germ phobic. And I can't imagine being germ phobic in 1905 because everything's fucking filthy. I cannot.
Yes.
I can't picture it. So that must have been tremendously hard. She also, I am assuming she had some miscarriages, and he was the only son, the only child.
Okay.
So she was super protective of him and she didn't want anything to happen to him. And so she got this fear of him getting polio, and then she put the fear on him to not get polio and to not get diseases and not get, anytime he had like a sniffle, she would freak out. So
actually, that's super common, by the way, of parents of an only child.
You and I grew up in big families, but you have one kid.
Yeah, to have, when you only have one, you get very hyper focused on your one child.
For a while, they were living in Texas by the border in oil field country, and his father wanted to work in that business because he figured that's a way to make some money. Mm-hmm. And they were looking at the different oil rigs and how do you actually break through the earth, the ground, and then suck up the oil. And his father had come up with a drill that revolutionized how it was done. So it was done like 1,000 times easier than it was done before. So his dad put a patent on it, and then he created this Hughes company that made a shitload of money.
Okay.
And they didn't sell the equipment, they leased everything. And they were the only ones, it was the only game in town.
Got it.
Now, Howard, he went away to 2 different private schools. One was in Massachusetts, and he was 10 years old, and his mother freaked the fuck out. Like, they immediately regretted it because they didn't think he was getting much of an education. But she was not used to not having her boy. And he went 3,000 miles away.
I can't imagine.
It's 1915. He's a little neurotic. He's a little, he has an accent. All the kids there are making fun of him. And it was very humiliating for him. So he comes home.
All the other kids sound like Marky Mark, right? They're all like,
"That's
you have a wicked accent."
I think they're more like the mid-Atlantic accent, like the Catherine Hepburns. I think it's more the fancy pants, not the.
Sometimes dead is better. Like that. I can't do accents, by the way, at all.
His mother, also he spent some time in California. So his dad was in California and in Texas, and his mother stayed in Texas. They made a shitload of money, and very easily they got into high Texas society, which is normally they were into old money, but they made so much so quickly and were making money for other people that they were part of the highfalutin stuff. His
Yeah.
dad loved the pictures, the motion pictures.
The motion pictures.
Let's go, okay? So he also had a house in California, in Pasadena, California, and it was this gorgeous house. So they were living in two different places. His mother, when Howard was 16, she was going for an operation, and she had some issues, pelvic issues, and they were doing an operation on her, and they used too much sedation, and she died on the operating table.
That's awful.
And he was devastated because they were very, very close.
Aww.
Yeah. 2 years later, his father died.
Damn.
And he was an only child, and he inherited this huge company. And he was going to Rice University at the time, and he was completely, and I've been through this when you've had, big deaths like that, very close together. It's destabilizing. Put on top of that, he's 19 years old, and he feels alone.
Yeah.
The Hughes family had his side inherit some of the business, but it was mainly on Howard. And Howard immediately just was very shrewd and smart and knew how to make deals. And what's always said about Howard Hughes is that he inherited millions and millions of dollars. He inherited like $100,000, which is a lot of money for them.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the money you think. He actually did turn that around into a big business and made a shitload of money. And so once he got comfortable with that, he, like his father, always had this interest in motion pictures and movie studios.
You're going to be a star.
Oh, my God, kid, let's go. Dateline, San Francisco. Howard Hughes shows up and stirs some shit. He goes to Hollywood. He inherits his father's house, in Pasadena. And Pasadena, LA is a schlep with a highway. There was no highway then. So it was actually quite a distance. So he had met all these people, and he met the moneyed people that owned the big places.
Okay.
And then he went the back way. He didn't start like lowly and then work his way up in the business. He started by meeting all the people who got rich in the first place. And he was this wunderkind. He was very tall. He was outgoing. He seemed to be outgoing. He washed his hands a lot, and he seemed to be hard of hearing, and he was hard of hearing on one of his ears. But other than that, he was pretty charming. And he starts going around the circles in Hollywood and starts investing in different movie properties and learning what filmmaking is. He does really well. Along the way, he is meeting all these amazing women. One of them is Jean Harlow, who was a teenager who didn't even really want to be an actress, but her mother pushed her into it. So in 1926, he's starting to make movies and producing movies. And he's someone that once he has something in his head, he can't let it go. And he can't always verbalize what's in his head. Most of us can't. It's kind of tough to do that.
Yes.
But he is so smart, he learns everyone's jobs. So he knows what everybody does. So he can figure out how to but he wears people out. I mean, his energy level is through the roof. He can work 24 to 48 hours without a rest. And he expects everybody else. Yeah.
That's pretty bananas.
Considering at the time he didn't drink really. Yeah. And he didn't use drugs. He was when he was wooing women, he wouldn't drink at all. He would have 7-Up or something. Later on, he would, but we'll get to that. I forgot to mention, on his way to Hollywood, he was dating a girl in Houston who was a high society chick. They were fooling around one night, and then he had a friend drive her home, and the friend and her got in a car accident, and she was killed.
Damn.
And that was like the third death in 2 years for him.
Oh my God. So that's a lot.
It was a lot to take in. So he marries this woman in Houston who was a high society woman. And she would come to Pasadena with him, but she wouldn't go to LA. And eventually they just got divorced. And her she wanted to have kids. She wanted to just live in Houston. She was tired of all this bullshit. And he's like, nah, I like it here. I'm going to be a big star. And he's 21 years old, and he's now in motion pictures. Meets Jean Harlow, and he puts her in this movie Hell's Angels, and Hell's Angels has a lot of flying in it, and it has a lot of stunts and daring do. It was very difficult for movie business because when they were transitioning from silent film to talkies, is that the acting style changes.
Yes.
And how you record voices, is very challenging to match it to what's on screen. So everyone's learning how to do it, and they're trying to make money and people just gobbled up movies. They were putting out a movie every week. All the studios were.
Yes.
People went to the movies all the time for entertainment. And so he puts out Hell's Angels, and it has Jean Harlow in there. And he goes through, it's set in World War I. It's not a great movie, but it's fun to watch. And the stunts are pretty cool.
She's beautiful.
She's so sexy and beautiful.
Yeah. She has a very sad story.
She dies very young. I mean, her husband dies and then she dies really young. And it's because she had a condition people didn't know about, which happened a lot back then.
Yeah. How would they know? This is before the Hays Code. So you could get away with a lot more in movies. And
people talked about how, like most of, and Karina Longworth puts this so well. She says that Hollywood was built on the male gaze and women's bodies.
Yes.
And it still is. It's like porn before you can get porn are these kinds of movies in the 20s and 30s.
I think people, when they think of older movies, they think of movies from the 40s and 50s, which were prudish, I guess, for lack of a better word. But there was a lot of subtext and you had to be in the know to kind of get what they're really talking about. But then if you watch like a pre-code movie from the 20s and the 30s, you're like, oh shit. Like
you'll see tits.
You can't believe what they were getting away with back then. I have a friend who's obsessed with pre-code movies. It's like her jam. Yeah. Well, and so she loves to watch them and they boggle the mind. You're like, oh shit, they were doing some shit back then.
Well, all these things sort of come together. So I wrote a book, not to brag, but I wrote a book called Filmed in Brooklyn, and it was about the first movie studio was in first in this country. Thank you. Was in Brooklyn, New York, and then other people caught along to the idea, like, oh, you could just put anything on a screen, people will show up. Before where there was television, not everybody could afford a radio. I mean, it was like it was entertainment that you could go to every week. It had air conditioning. So in the 1910s, they're building up the techniques of how to film a movie. By the time the 20s come along, America had been through World War I. They had been through a flu epidemic.
What's that like?
The stock market everyone's making money at the stock market. Women are bob haircuts. There's drinking. Cocaine is coming into use that people didn't know that you could get addicted to. There's all these things that happen. So Hollywood goes from being this cow town to all of a sudden this megalopolis. And you have all these people coming to town, going there just to make money or just be famous or just to act. And some people go just because the weather's nice. But they're trying to build up this community. And it was lawless. People just did whatever they wanted because there wasn't like a National Enquirer yet to like expose them. That doesn't happen till like the 40s and 50s. I mean, you had to worry about the columnists, but most of them were in the pocket with the studios. So
exactly.
With the studio, they would write nice things about you.
They were like the Golden Globes.
They were like we just did an episode last week about the Golden Globes.
They're like the Hollywood foreign press.
And women showed up in Hollywood and they would hear these stories and say, well, that sounds great. I'll be in a motion picture. I'll be in a movie. I'll leave my podunk town. Or I've always been, a lot of times people show up. They were the best at their school wherever they were. They were in all the plays. They were good looking. They were charming. Everybody thought they were a star. And you go to LA or New York and you're like, holy shit.
You look just like everyone else.
Everyone else.
Yeah.
And I would say this is a thing I've learned later in my life. Like, talent is not as important as you think. Talent is great, but it doesn't happen on talent alone. You've got to be
some of it's drive.
It's drive.
Right.
It's
timing.
Luck. Timing. Yeah. It's who you know. It's who you hang out with. There's so many other factors that are involved. But some of these women show up, and back then there's no internet. You can't call home. You're lucky if your home has a phone, but even if they did, you can't call long distance. It's too expensive. You have to write letters if you're going to keep in touch. people didn't have addresses that were permanent. Women would come to Hollywood and just would get passed around from studio executive to studio executive. And it was basically like sex work. I mean, they would say, we'll put you up in this apartment and you just go to meetings. You go to Louis Mayer, and then you'll go to Jack Warner, and then you'll go to this person, and they'll say, you are going to go to this ad guy's office and you're going to audition for him. And, you know, you hope it wasn't too bad. Also, they would have, this is a town run by men. They didn't give women big positions. Women, it was much more egalitarian when the business started. And then when people realized you could make a shitload of money, all of a sudden women and people of color and gay people, like they started moving to the margins.
Yes.
There were also these crazy Hollywood parties where celebrities would be like, I want a bunch of girls there. And these girls would be sent to the parties. They called it like 6-month contracts.
Oh, okay.
So some of them were under what was called, and Howard Hughes was one of those people. He would put girls, we'll get to him at RKO Studios, but they had, before there was the Hays Code, so Hollywood is going crazy. And then people are dying, like overdose deaths. People are dying, like there's the movie director that was killed. There's Hearst Castle where crazy shit is happening. You hear about women jumping off the Hollywood sign. Like there's all kinds of things happening around Hollywood.
Yes.
And people are saying they can see it on the screen. You know, they see these films are getting more and more salacious. And Hell's Angels, they take Jean Harlow's body, and they put her in the slimmest little dresses and show as much of her as they possibly can. And then there's the movie that's called Scarface, where it's based on Al Capone's life. It's directed by Howard Hawks. It has Howard Hughes in there. And it's sex, and it's guns, and it's money, and it's people beating the snot out of each other. And people are definitely having sex. They're not alluding to anything. So he's like, sweet, this is awesome. He's not known for like small talk, but everybody says he's super intelligent. And like when he's focused on somebody, he acts like they're the greatest ever. Anyway.
Like a love bomber?
He's a love bomber supreme. He like basically asked every single woman that he dated to marry him. He would follow them. He would do all these things to them. The Hays Code came about because people said enough's enough. The Catholic leagues all over the country were complaining. And so then they had rules like 2 people can't be in the same bed. You can't see a toilet in the bathroom. If somebody does something bad, there has to be some sort of point where they're shown how they were wrong. So like in the end of the bad seed, spoiler in the play, the girl gets away with all this shit. But in the movie, they make it very clear, like, oh, Rhoda's been going to be taken away. It was just a goof. Ha ha ha. That's what happens with the Hays Code.
It's so ridiculous. Like, sorry, we have to pretend that you live in a world where no one takes a shit.
No one takes a shit, that married people don't sleep in the same bed.
Which was a thing up until like, what, the 70s.
On television, you couldn't do it until like, I think the Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Brady Bunch, by the way, big deal, just because it was like divorced parents who were like remarried and like
they weren't divorced. They both lost their.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Mary Tyler Moore was
because
supposed to be divorced.
They couldn't be divorced.
Right.
Yes.
Mary Tyler Moore was supposed to be divorced, and then they said no way.
Right. It's bananas.
It's funny, like the entertainment that they then put out for like 50 years, or they're trying to. Clean entertainment, family friendly, but what's going on behind the scenes is total shenanigans. He has this connection with one woman, and he dates people like Katharine Hepburn, and they're madly in love. They have this amazing relationship. He's got Lana Turner, Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner,
most beautiful women.
I think they're all so beautiful. Ava Gardner,
gorgeous.
And they're all young when they come to Hollywood. Jane Russell, he produced The Outlaw. She was very slim but had big boobs.
Yeah.
And he designed her bra for her. Turns out it didn't really fit, and she just made it look like it fit, like, because she's super smart, and it's like, all right, this is the game you have to play. She liked him, but she could see that some people didn't. He was so controlling of Ava Gardner that he had her and her mother move into his house, and then he put them under guard and wouldn't let her out because she was married to Mickey Rooney. And Mickey Rooney's definitely on our list. He's a big piece of shit. He asked Ava Gardner to marry him. He asked her like a dozen times. And then it's 2 days after Pearl Harbor. And he asks her on a date. Yeah. She says, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. She's like 19. He gives her the ring. They pose for a picture. And then he whispers, you got to give me the ring back because I have to hawk it. I'm in debt. He's a real asshole. Yeah. What goes around Hollywood also is as soon as there's a pretty girl off the bus or from the train station or the airport, wherever this pretty girl comes in, there are guys swarming all over these places trying to swoop them up to bring them to all the movie studio heads, including Howard Hughes. And he would put
Scott Baio. And Scott Baio Howard Stern used to joke that Scott Baio used to do that way to bus stations.
Yeah, he would. Yeah. He called Baywatch Bayo-Watch because he got all the women on there. Such a douchebag. That's true. There's a woman named Jane Greer that he also had a crush on, and she was married. And a lot of these women are married, but people are like married-ish. Like, okay, well, if the person's back in my hometown, it doesn't really matter. And
married adjacent.
Yeah. And he had this big crush on her. And I think they went out a few times, but she wasn't that into him. And she did some movies with Robert Mitchum. She did some film noir stuff. And then later in her career, she did much better. But he was producing movies and he meets Jane Greer and he's like so into her. And she's kind of like, nah, I'm just going to act. I'm just going to do my thing. And he's realizing, he realizes I got to stop picking women that have self-esteem and that have a career behind them that are like over 25. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't. That's my problem because I get it,
That's my problem.
I get an Ava Gardner, then she wants somebody else. And she has such a hot career that she could just go. Same with Katharine Hepburn. Gene Tierney, like he went out with everybody. Yeah. Betty Davis said he was the best lover. They all said he was a great lover too. And they said he wasn't like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Like he took his time. He didn't drink, so he could just, Yeah. So he was good at it, apparently.
Is this where Leonardo DiCaprio got his inspiration for dating like younger women and then they cap out at like 25?
There's so many that do that to this day. I mean, it's still just like...
It's normal. It's a normal thing. An everyday occurrence.
Yeah. This one particular woman, he's really into her. And she's sort of like, nah, I want to just do my career. And he's so obsessed with her. He takes control of RKO Studios. He takes over a movie studio. So now he's the one in charge. And so she's now working for him. She rejects him and now he's her boss.
Oh my gosh.
And she was, like I said, she was in Robert Mitchum movies. Like she was doing good. She was doing well.
Yeah.
He makes her life so miserable at RKO that she says, I just want to get out of this contract. He says, well, you have to buy it. And she's not working in a couple of years. He doesn't put her in any pictures. He's
so shitty.
He's passing around at meetings, but then she gets turned down for stuff and she doesn't realize why because she does really well and then they just don't call back. She's being ghosted. And it's because he's calling people saying she's troublesome. You don't want to hire her. What Harvey Weinstein does.
Yes.
Later.
I was thinking the same thing.
So he basically says, you want out of this contract, and she wants to marry some guy that she's in love with. He says, you have to buy your contract out, and it's $7,500. 1948. That's a lot of money. And she's like, look, I haven't worked in a couple of years. How do I do this? And he says, you pay me $50, like $25 a month, or is it $25 a week until you pay this off? And she's like, you know what? Fine. And she took her 3 years, but she paid it off. But she said, every week I had to give money to someone I hated. Like he was connected to me in this weird way.
Why does this sound familiar to me? I don't know, but girl, same. It's a shitty feeling.
He had many women like this at RKO. First of all, he was also a fervent anti-communist. He shows up at RKO and he starts looking around and he's like, there's a bunch of commies in here. I'm going to... So they don't make a movie for 6 months When I told you they have to put out something
Yes.
every week just to stay, paddling,
Yeah.
anyway, 6 months he spends trying to root out all the anti-communists, and he just fires people left and right, and he's just a total manic freak. But he's also, at the same time that he's doing this, he was a pilot. He flew in his movie Hell's Angels. He was interested in aviation. He got his pilot's license. He's also super interested in, when America goes into the war effort, he's like, well, how can aviation help with the war effort? And they said there's this problem of getting stuff overseas that's like very bulky and heavy. We can get people on a plane and fly them. But what about tanks? What about artillery? And he's like, I know what. I'm going to build a gigantic fucking plane, and it's going to be so big, it'll put everything you want in there, and I'm going to make it out of wood, and we're going to fly this. And the government gives him millions of dollars in contracts to do this. And he already had his own little base in Southern California, Air Base. So he's doing that while he's doing Archeo Pictures. And he builds this thing, and he calls it the Spruce Goose. And the wingspan... by the way, I should say Christina, one of our listeners, gave me this long ass email, by the way, like all these things about Howard Hughes. So thank you so much. But she's been to this museum.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
It's in Oregon. They have an aviation museum up there. And she said that it's like the length of a football field.
Okay.
He basically, he goes to Congress, and he has to, there's all this old-timey footage of him, and he's holding something in his ear. He's like, I'll tell you something. I'm working on the Spruce Goose, and I'm a proud American. I hate commies, and I'm a businessman. I make money. Fuck you. And everybody in the crowd's like, yay.
Yeah, fuck us.
Fuck us.
We're the worst.
And he says, I'm going to fly this thing, and I'm going to show you all that it works, see? And they're like, okay. And he manages to fly the Spruce Goose a little bit.
Little bit.
And that's the only time it was ever flown. And now it's in this airfield. But he did buy Trans World Airlines, or TWA, and started switching the kind of planes that they used, and basically helped modernize air travel. And he made a shitload of money doing that.
I bet.
Like I said, there's the fervent anti-communism in there. He's all right with McCarthy hearings. He thinks they're great. He thinks all of them are amazing. And he's really got a fondness for one particular politician by the name of Richard Nixon. He is a very early supporter of Richard Nixon. Nixon is definitely on our list.
Yes.
It would take a couple of episodes, but he's definitely an asshole. But there's some shady shit that he did with Richard Nixon, in Nixon's campaign, that would foreshadow about 15 years later when it came to the Watergate. All right, I'm going to fast forward. He's Wayne's World. We'll do that one day for Dorking Out.
Yes.
He's an asshole to women. He does marry a woman. He was married to one woman for a few years, and that was in Houston. That was our Houston Belle. But there's another woman that he was married to, and she was an actress. Yes, sorry, it's right here. It was Jean Peters. Like I said, he proposed to all these women. I mean, over and over and over again. And the more famous ones, Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn, Jean Tierney, Ava Gardner. I mean, goddamn, the list goes on and on.
Yes.
They would say he would beg them to marry him. He said this to all the women, but he did marry one woman named Jean Peters, and that was in 1957. And she was a really beautiful actress. And they have this bizarre relationship. They're together until 1971. It's one of those things, he didn't want anybody else to have her.
Okay.
So he was sort of lighthousing her. He would shine to her occasionally when he was interested, but then when he wasn't. But she kind of found a rhythm with it. Like, she didn't want kids with him. She wanted her freedom, enough freedom to kind of just go out and do her thing. And they would hang out every once in a while and have dinner and watch movies. He was totally into movies. He could watch movies for hours. Once again, 24, 48 hours he would spend in screening rooms.
Maybe I would have liked a Howard Hughes.
I don't think that sounds bad.
I also would just like to sit around and watch movies and occasionally have dinner with someone.
It doesn't sound
I'm
bad.
like, that's, yeah. And then the rest of the time I could just do what I want and
he
have
just
my own
does his
space.
thing.
I'm like, it's not so bad.
He doesn't want to share a bedroom because he has his stuff, like his thing. So I'm like, that doesn't sound too bad. But
Yeah.
so Jean Peters is an actress, really beautiful, and she doesn't have too many bad things to say about it. He also, all kinds of what we now call NDAs. He makes everybody sign paperwork
Sure.
so that they can't say anything. And so all the people that had the 6-month contracts and then just like got sent back home, like couldn't say anything. And everybody loved Howard Hughes because he was a billionaire. He was tall. He made money. He was screwing a lot of women, a lot of famous women, and he like had a good repartee with reporters. Everyone wanted to just
that's
keep
all
him
you
going.
need to do.
Right. He actually could walk the walk, I'm saying, like with business.
Right.
Terry Moore is another actress. She was 19 years old when she met him. He was 43. She
Ew.
was a Mormon, and she was attracted to him because he didn't drink. He was also she was a actress. She wanted to act, but he also wanted to sleep with her really bad, and she wouldn't do it. And he said, "Why won't you sleep with me?" And she goes, "Because we're not married. I'm Mormon. You got to get married. We got to get married." So he takes her out on a boat one day, and they're out at sea, and he says, "Guess what? I'm the captain, and I can marry us. And your mom's here, so let's have our wedding right now." And she's like, "Okay." So she's like 20 years old. He tells her they're married. He sleeps with her, and then he dumps her a few weeks later. And then he says,
So
"Oh, by the
shitty.
way, we were never really married. That's just a made-up thing."
So shitty.
Asshole.
Ha ha. You're going to hell.
No celestial kingdom for you. Womp, womp. In 1936, he was in a car accident that killed another person. He was drunk driving, and the cops let it go because it's Hollywood.
Yes.
He's a very powerful man in Hollywood. The man that he killed was in the was waiting for the bus and was in the safe lane to wait for the bus, and he crossed the line and hit him.
That's
Right?
awful.
It's terrible for his family and for everybody who loved him. And Howard, he gave a statement to the police, and then all of a sudden the people that were witnesses were like, "Oh, no, he wasn't driving. Somebody else was driving, and the man walked right in front of the car. It's the damnedest thing." And that's so nobody ever was tried for it. It's so fucked up. 10 years later, in 1946, he is flying one of his planes around Beverly Hills. And
Like
there's
you do.
Like one does. And it's done so well in the movie The Aviator. You could see clips online. But he's all of a sudden having engine trouble, and his plane crashes in Beverly Hills through this suburban neighborhood, takes out a couple of houses. No one's killed. It's
That's a miracle.
unfucking real. No one is hurt badly, except for him. He was flying alone. He crashes into the ground. There's people that drag him out. The plane caught on fire. He broke
Jesus.
almost every bone in his body. He had 3rd-degree burns, like Mr. Burns. He had. We'll talk about Mr. Burns. They did that on The Simpsons.
Yes, we will.
When he comes out, he's in so much pain. And this is a guy who never took any pills or wouldn't even take aspirin. All of a sudden, they're like, "Here's codeine. Here's morphine. Here's booze. They'll make you feel better."
Oh my God, it's super addicting.
And
obviously
he's super addicted. So
Yeah.
around 1948, he has this car accident. He buys RKO, and then he sells RKO back and makes a tidy profit. He buys TWA and then eventually gives that back. And over time, he gets married to Jean Peters, and he's very peripatetic. He's here, he's there. He stays on friends' couches sometimes. He's not attached to things. He, like I said, never owns fancy cars.
right.
He never kept money on him. There was always people around to pay for shit, but he never had money on him. He just was in his head a lot. But he's somebody who was rich from the time he was 19. And he just was able to do whatever he wanted. Mm-hmm. But he had these health issues from the accident. He has PTSD from these accidents and his parents' death and all the things he's done. And he has OCD with the pain. And the deafness, which is getting really pronounced, and he won't treat any of those things.
That's a lot.
And he's afraid of germs, and he's afraid of doctors. He's afraid of hospitals because they have germs at hospitals because his mother got him all. So he doesn't get regular checkups. He basically just gets a Dr. Feelgood to take care of him and follow him around from place to place. And he eventually winds up in Las Vegas. And while he's in Las Vegas, he doesn't gamble. He doesn't drink. He just hangs out at his suite all the time and just orders. And he has a big thing for banana nut ice cream from Baskin Robbins. So he has like
delicious.
It is delicious.
I get it.
So he's staying at the Sands Hotel or at this hotel in Las Vegas. And they're trying to get rid of him because he has all these weird people like doing all these weird things for him, and he doesn't gamble. They're like, he's not making us any money. He doesn't go to the shows. He won't talk to anybody. So he's like, well, fuck it. I'll just buy the hotel. He's so rich that the mob can't touch him. Like, they try to scare him, but he has so many people. He has like 30 people around him. Like all the time, like taking care of things.
And then I bought the mob.
So I bought the mob. He starts buying real estate in Las Vegas. So the 50s are going into the 60s. And now he's doing business totally just on the phone. And he has the phones jacked up so that I can hear because he's deaf, like he's so deaf. So people who pick up his phone by accident, like their ears are practically blown off their heads, like he has it set up this way. But he's constantly making phone calls and then recording calls from people. So if you call him and they'll record your phone call, there's no voicemail or anything then. He doesn't talk to people directly. Everything's through someone else. And he just creates this world where he just is staying in a room, he's watching movies or he's doing his business, and then he goes to bed. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And he's buying up more and more properties. He buys a local television station. And they used to, like at midnight, television stations used to end. And they play the national anthem. He's like, I don't want that shit. I want you to play movies. So he's one of the first people to do that. Like, he'd play old movies all night. And he said,
hey, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, that's one good thing he did. And occasionally he comes out. Somebody will come along and he becomes this recluse. He lives in Vegas for a while. He also lives in London. He lives in Vancouver. He's just all over the place. And people can't seem to locate, like they can't see to tie him down. This is a guy who was always chasing in the papers and always like posing for pictures. His appearance had changed. He's getting older. He's in a lot of pain. And he has all these issues of like the hand washing. He saves his urine in jars.
Why does he do that?
He doesn't trust toilets very well.
That's because of that code in Hollywood where they go to a toilet. And he watches all those movies. So he's like, we don't need toilets. The people in the movies don't have toilets.
Lizzie Borden's father didn't have toilets. Look what happened to him. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Every once in a while, somebody will show up, and he has this called the Mormon Mafia. So there's all these Mormons that start working for him. And he likes them because they don't drink, they don't fool around, they're all business. And he just tells them what to do. And they like him because they think, oh, great. They have this thing, tithing, or I think it's tithing is what it's called, but it's 10% of your income goes to a church.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So like maybe we'll get him, and that's a shitload of money for the Mormon church. So he has all these people working in secret for him. And occasionally the press comes a-calling or the Congress calls him for a thing, and he'll do a phone interview, but he won't go out in public. So let's move this to 1976. And he's in a plane, and he's flying to Mexico, and he's really not doing well. And he dies midair.
Wow.
And he had like kidney failure, and he had his doctor with him and somebody else with him. And so they pull into Houston. They bring him back to Texas, Brownsville, Texas. And it's the 70-year-old body. And no one knows who this is. They're saying, oh, this is Howard Hughes. And they're looking at it like, that doesn't look like Howard Hughes. And he has no ID on him because he never carried ID with him.
Right.
They had to take his fingerprints to find out if this was really Howard Hughes. And
Jesus.
That's how they identified him. And this is what from Texas Monthly. The 70-year-old body he saw there gave him a shock. The corpse was pale gray and emaciated, covered with bed sores, wrinkled and scarred, An ugly tumor poked from the left side of the scalp. The
Ew.
left shoulder was swollen and bluish gray.
Oh my God.
Hughes did not look completely unkempt. He had medium-length gray hair, a thinning gray beard, and as many would note, no overlong fingernails. That was the whole thing about him. Everybody said he had long fingernails. But the world's richest man looked nothing so much as a long-starved beggar. He had shrunken an inch in height, and his weight was down to less than 93 pounds. And he was like
Jesus.
6'4" at his tallest.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
He died. He died. He's dead.
He died.
He doesn't leave a will.
What? What the fuck?
No
I'm
will.
going to live forever. I don't need a will.
He so doesn't trust people. He doesn't trust anybody. Not his oldest relative. He has no old friends. He trusts absolutely no one. The only thing he ever said was he wanted some of his money to go to a hospital, like something science and research.
All right.
But other than that, so there's a guy that comes out, and Melvin, remember Melvin and Howard, the movie?
Yeah.
There's a guy in the early 70s that pretended that he was going to leave him all of his money in his will. Like they met in the desert of Utah. That turned out to be total bullshit. So Howard Hughes has over $1 billion. It's 1976 billion.
That's so much fucking money.
So many people all of a sudden are like, I'm related, I'm related, I'm related,
Yes.
I'm related. They eventually gave out the money to over 1,000 people.
Wow.
And some of them got a shitload, like 10 million, like 1976.
Because
10
they
million.
were like vague, like loosely related? Is that why?
He had nieces and nephews. Nieces and nephews, or like they're from his cousins. From his
Cousins.
Yeah, because his parent, he was like I said, he was the only child.
Yeah.
His dad had brothers, and he was close to them.
Got it.
But once he left Texas, he kind of went to L.A. and then kind of just did his own thing. He was very young.
Yes.
When his parents died, he kind of just started his life. Isn't that crazy?
Is so, it is so bananas, like that you're just living your life and like this cousin or second cousin dies and it's like, here's $1 million or something. Like,
yeah, it'll change your life.
That's bananas.
It'll change your life. I mean, it went on for like 10 years dealing with all the people that said that and all the money had to be sorted out because he didn't update systems. Everything was like, it's in my head. I got it up here. Mm-hmm. It's like when my mom was sick, she just refused to write things down. It'd be like, Mom, where did you put your rings? I don't know where they are. But anyway, so that's our creep this week. Howard Hughes, he lives on. When there's lots of jokes about like his long hair, and he wore Kleenex boxes on his feet because he wouldn't get shoes. I mean, there was a lot of quirky behavior. It could have been head injury on top of mental health.
Well, what you're describing, like clearly he wasn't okay there at the end.
But he had just
go ahead.
But he shut himself off from people. Like once people's got really too close and kind of like, I'm really concerned about you, he would just.
Right.
He had enough money to put people away, and it was smart enough to like manage his own money. And, he was a billionaire who actually had ideas and some guts to try them out. So, all right.
But he also was shitty to women.
Very shitty to women and shitty to some people in the business world and things. He was a complicated man, but oops.
There's a very funny spoof of Howard Hughes on The Simpsons where Mr. Burns is basically Howard Hughes, and he's like grown his fingernails out and he's wearing the Kleenex boxes, and he's like, and I've built this spruce goose or whatever, and it's really tiny. It's really, really small. And Smithers is like, that's a terrific model. And he's like, this is actual size. And he's like, get in. And he like points a gun at me. I said get in. It's really funny.
He was a recluse. It's like, Shelley Miscavige of Scientology. Like he's just someone that disappeared and no one saw. And he just, like I said, had a few people that he kept close to his side, but everybody else was gone. So by the time he died, like he was unrecognizable. The trajectory of his life is unreal. It's just,
Yes.
yeah. So that's why people talk about him to this day. The money that he made, though, is still making money. There's still a Hughes corporation.
Wow.
There's the hospital that he put money into. Like, he didn't lose it all. He was very, very smart about the things he did. He was just kind of an asshole, especially with women.
Yes. Good job on this creep, Margot.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a lot to take in, and a lot, because there's so many other places. There's other stuff too. Some people are like, why are you talking about this thing or that thing? I can't be here all day. So,
yes.
Are you ready to talk about your non-creep?
Okay. I debated doing Jean Harlow, but I decided to switch it up. I instead was like, I'm just going to pick another Howard.
Ooh.
So I went with someone named Howard Zinn. Do you know who Howard Zinn is?
Yeah, that's from the movie that I'm thinking of, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
He mentions him in Good Will Hunting.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the movie the other day, too. We were talking about it.
Yeah. He was a historian and playwright. He was they would label him a socialist thinker, quote unquote. He served in World War II. He wrote over 20 books, and his most famous ones were A People's History of the United States. And then he wrote another one called A Young People's History of the United States. And he wrote a memoir called You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train. And there's a documentary based on that too, by the way.
So Governor DeSantis is a big fan, I'm sure. The Florida governor in our country is a fucking douchebag. And
he's such a douchebag. So Howard Zinn was born August 24th, 1922. He grew up in Brooklyn.
Oh.
FYI. His parents were Jewish immigrants. His father ran candy stores, but it was during the Depression, so there wasn't a lot of success there. But
How
Howard
much did
was
you want your parents to run a candy store when you were a kid?
Oh
That
my
would have been my
gosh, everybody
dream.
wants that. Everybody wants that. He was always a super, super smart guy. He graduated from high school, but then he got a job as like a pipe fitter at a Navy yard. And that's where he met his future wife, Rosalind. They were married their entire lives.
Oh.
Like, he went to New York University where he got a degree. He ended up getting a master's and a doctorate from the Columbia University. He then got a job at Spelman College. This was in 1956. Now, Spelman College was a historically Black women's college, and he got a job as the chairman of the history department. And some of his students were Marian Wright Edelman. She founded the Children's Defense Fund. Alice Walker, the novelist, and the composer Bernice Johnson Reagon. And he used to march with them in civil rights protests all the time. And that actually ended up getting him fired from there. Because he was
Really?
like the president of that college did not like that, didn't want things to get political, and he was like, fuck you, and he kept doing it anyway. So he got a job at Boston University, and he actually like traveled with people to Vietnam to like help people where they released some of the prisoners that they had there.
Mm-hmm.
And he produced some books about that. And then he retired in 1988. And I thought this was really interesting. His last class that he was teaching, he ended it early because he wanted to go join a picket line somewhere. And he took all the students with him. I'm like, that's pretty.
Yeah, that's
I'm
amazing.
like, that's pretty rad. And like, he just was this like really interesting thinker. Like he is, a lot of people throw the word socialism like it's a bad word around this country. It's not a bad word. He described himself as a democratic socialist. So that would be like an AOC, actually. He wrote so much about civil rights and anti-war movements, about labor history in the United States. And he was 87 when he died. He had a heart attack. This was 2010. His wife died like 2 years before that,
Aw.
and they were married the entire time. So he seems like a solid dude. So that was my pick for Not a Creep.
That's a great not a creep, and it's one of those books that freak people out because he's taking stories from people who aren't normally quoted in history books,
Yes.
the people on the margins of history, and puts their voices in there as well, like one should do, like listen to all the voices that are existing at the time. So yeah,
Exactly.
that's an excellent choice, Sonia.
Thank you.
If you like the sound of our voices, I say good for you. Thank you for
You
that.
have excellent taste.
You have excellent taste. We co-host a podcast that's called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies, and then occasionally we also offer our suggestions for pop culture. Sonia, what are we going to be covering next?
My cousin Vinny.
Woo!
This has been a request for several years now. I think it is time. So we are going to do My Cousin Vinny. I'm really looking forward to that. I honestly, I don't know if I've seen it since the theater.
I have not seen it in a very long time. I looked up the top 10 songs. We always like give our what the songs were at the time, and it's a fun time for movies.